Minutes are present. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen.
Good morning, Your Honor.
We are ready to get started. Next witness for the defense.
Thank you, Your Honor. The defense calls Jamal Abdullah.
Do you solemnly state that the evidence matter shall be distributed?
I do.
Thank you. Yes.
Take your mask off.
State, spell your first and your last name for the record.
Jamal, Jamal, Abdullah, Abdullah.
Sir, just a couple of rules about your testimony. First off, we need you to continue to use that microphone. You can adjust it if you like. The base moves, the top moves, or you can adjust your chair, but you do need to speak directly in it, okay?
Yes, sir.
Next rule is when the lawyers ask questions of you, we need a verbal or audible answer. So if you just nod your head up and down, shake your head side to side, court reporter can't record that. So we need a verbal yes, no, or whatever it is that you're going to say, okay?
Yes, sir.
Last rule is please wait until the lawyers are done asking their question before you respond. In other words, if you're pretty sure you know what the question's going to be and you jump in and you talk at the same time, court reporter can't record that. So please wait until the question is asked before you answer, all right?
Yes, sir.
All right, Mr. Welber.
Thank you. Morning, sir.
Morning.
You know Brandon Martin?
Yes, sir.
Do you see him here today?
Yes, sir.
Where is he?
Behind you. Behind you, sir.
He's in the white shirt with a white mask?
Yes, sir.
How do you know him?
That is my cousin.
And on which side of the family?
My uncle Michael's side of the family. Michael Martin and my mother are brother and sister.
And how much older are you than Brandon?
I want to say 13, 14 years older than he is.
So when he was born, you were, let's say, a teenager?
Yes, sir.
Were you close with Brandon and his brother Sean growing up?
Yes, sir.
Can you describe some family events and sort of how often you would be with their family growing up?
So until I got of the age of independence, able to move around myself, I would see them at least 5 times a year. They would come to my grandparents' home, or they would have a family function at their home, different holidays. So we would see each other then.
And were you close with Brandon and Sean?
Yes, sir.
Can you describe for the jury what Brandon was like as a child?
Fun, kind. He was very humble, reserved, very charismatic, passionate. Yeah.
What about your Uncle Michael? Were you close with him as well?
Yes, sir.
How would you describe him?
Life of the party, just fun, entertaining, happy, wanted to please. He loved to please people. He loved to he wanted everybody to have a good time. Every time you're around him, he wanted to make you laugh, wanted to make you smile. Yeah.
At some point, when Brandon was growing up, it sounds like you got a little bit older and moved on in your life. Did you stay connected with the Martin family?
Sure.
Okay. In what way?
So when I got a little bit more independence, where I have a vehicle, I was in college, I would come to the house a lot. I always loved to hang out over there. So I would be there a lot when I was able to physically be there. And so we grew up in the San Bernardino area. So I would go to my emails, my Uncle Mike's, often. And I say often, I'm there maybe 3 times a week.
Why did you like going over there so much?
Oh yeah, Brandon, Sean, Uncle Mike, and Emil, we just play games, or we're outside doing some type of activity. If we're not going to certain type of events, I mean, from, Sean and Brandon being athletes, we always was at Brandon's baseball tournaments, or we're at Sean's football games, or weekend stuff. So I have my son is now 18. I used to take him with me over there. Him and Brandon used to play all the time. So, yeah.
Fair to say that the Martin family was an important part of your growing up.
Yes, sir.
At some point, did you notice some changes in Brandon?
Yes, sir.
Can you describe those for us?
His temperament. Just his temperament changed a bit. Temperament and, just got more distant, it seemed like. His attitude a little bit changed. Brandon and I, out of all of, like, my siblings, my cousins, I have two people who I have this certain type of relationship with. We had handshakes, and I mean, I don't even have that with my siblings. And then me and Brandon, we shared that. So when I saw the change in him, some part of me just thought it was just him growing to be his own independent man. But the things that I would hear and see, it would just throw me off, because that's not who I'm used to being around or seeing, as far as his disposition, his behavior.
About what age did you see these changes?
It has to be, Brandon was out of high school, maybe his first year out of high school.
Roughly 19 years old, somewhere around there?
19, 18 years old, yeah.
You said a change in his temperament. Can you be a little bit more specific about the behaviors that you saw?
Yeah, it was erratic behavior to where he would just spurt out different things, and disrespectful things to his parents, that how he grew up. I've never seen that in him, so it just caught me by surprise, caught me off guard.
And when Brandon was around 19, you were still spending a lot of time with the Martin family?
Yes, sir. And
did you ever go to the house that he had rented over in Yorba Linda?
I did on one occasion, but it was not. I was invited over there plenty of times, but I only went to the house one time to see the house.
The one time you went over there, did you just go for a short while to see the home, or did you go to a party at the house?
No party, just a short while, just to see the house. I heard about it through my Aunt Mel and Uncle Mike, and Brandon invited me out, and went over there one day, and just real short and simple.
Okay.
Yeah.
Other than the change in temperament and the erratic behavior, did you notice anything else that was different about Brandon?
Besides maybe his appearance over time. His appearance got to just...
what was different?
Well, you could tell he wasn't sleeping, he wasn't eating. He's like he's losing his weight, his physique was changing. Wasn't shaving. Those type of things.
Does Brandon look different to you today than he did growing up?
Yes, sir.
In what way?
His physique, his face. Looks like he's just not healthy, not well.
When you were with Brandon, after you noticed the sort of, the switch goes off and he changes like you described, did you ever see him talking to himself or having any behaviors like that concerned you?
Sure.
Hey, can you tell us about that?
So the first time I seen that was, I used to have a job at LA Fitness, and I believe I was going or I was leaving the job. And I get a phone call from my Aunt Mel's brother, Victor Anderson. He says, "Hey, Jamal, you need to get over here." So I'm like, "Okay, what's going on?" He's like, just get over here." So I go over to the house, and my Uncle Michael, he's sitting out in the driveway in Brandon's BMW. And so I'm like, and it's hot. It's a summer day. It's a summer day. Uncle Michael's sitting outside in the passenger seat. He has a jacket on. I'm like, "Uncle Michael, why you sitting out here? It's hot." He's like, "I can't let Brandon leave." So I'm like, "Okay." He's like, "We have to take this car in because the bumper was messed up on the car." So he says, "But Brandon wants to leave. I can't let him leave." So I'm like, "Okay, well, let me go in the house and let me see what's going on." So I go in there, I talk to Brandon. Brandon's irate. He wants his keys. And I'm like, "Okay, well, your dad said you guys got an appointment to go get the bumper fixed." Brandon says, nah. He needs to give me my keys, or I'm going to throw him out the car. And I said, "Nah, Brandon, you're not going to touch your dad." I say, "But he doesn't want to give you the keys until you guys go to your appointment." And he just like, and goes up the stairs. But as he's going up the stairs, he's talking away from me, but talking to something. And he's answering and talking. And I'm like, it's the first time I've ever seen that. So I'm like, what's going on? I go outside and I talk to my Uncle Mike, like, something's not right. He says, he doesn't even give me an answer. He just gives me a look. So as I go back inside the house, Brandon's coming down the stairs, trying to get out to the house, outside the house to talk to my uncle or to, like he says, try to throw him out the car, but I wasn't going to allow that to happen while I was there. But I told Brandon, I said, "Brandon, like talk to me. Like, what's happening?" He's like, "Nah," he didn't want to talk to me at all. He just, like, "Nah, I just," he was upset. He was upset. He was saying some things. I was saying some things to him. And then the next thing, he just gets this picture my Aunt Mel has with her family. It was on a banister. He looks at the picture and he goes, "Family, huh?" He's just like, and just starts talking to himself again. And I was like, "Are you trying to say like what's going, like something happened to you? Like what's going on with the family?" Because this was a picture of her and her brothers and her sisters, her siblings. And he's like, nah. And just starts talking to these, like he's talking to someone again. And so after that, I sit there and I wait until it was time for them to leave. And my Uncle Mike and Brandon, they get in the car. Maybe 30 minutes after him hearing the voices and talking to the picture, they leave and they go get the car, I guess repaired or take it to the insurance company to have them do whatever they need to do to it. I don't know. But that was the first time I've seen that ever.
And if you just to give us a time frame, how long was that before the murders in this case?
Maybe 2 years.
A couple years?
Mm-hmm. Maybe 2 years.
Do you know whether or not your aunt and uncle tried to help Brandon with what was going on with him?
Indirectly, not directly. I know that they've always, they're very concerned parents. They've always been very concerned, very loving. What was going on as far as specifically what they were doing, I can't answer that, but I can tell you that I'm sure they were directly involved in seeing and being a part of what was going on as far as the help that he.
In the 2-year period, when you first saw this, and you're describing that incident, and then up to the time of the murders, were you still around the Martin family?
Oh, yes, sir.
Did you see more behavior similar to Brandon hearing voices, talking to himself in that 2-year period leading up to the time of the murders?
Yes, sir. It was another incident where we're in the kitchen. Brandon used to be upstairs in his room, like normal, and he comes down. Well, he comes down, and my Uncle Mike asks him for a pot. And me and my Mel sitting at the table, and we're in the kitchen of the dining room area where there's like a table. My Uncle Mike is at the island. He's asking for a pot for some rice or something. And I don't remember exactly if it was for rice, but he asked Brandon for the pot. Brandon brings down the pot. Brandon calls his father a nigger. And that threw me off. And then Brandon walks off talking to himself again. And that was the last time I directly seen anything where I was like, my cousin really going through something.
How has life been for you since your Uncle Michael was killed?
My Uncle Mike, well, let's just say, my Uncle Mike, he was really close to me. There was a time in my life where I was struggling. And my Uncle Mike and my email, they've always been there to look out for me. So I have to believe that's a lot of it's hard. It's hard.
Did you love your Uncle Mike?
Sure. Yes, sir.
It's got to be difficult for you to be here today.
Yeah. Yes, sir.
You tell us, what are your feelings about Brandon?
I love him. As hard as this as hard as this whole thing is, I don't agree with what he's done, but I love him. I love him. And this isn't him. This ain't the B I used to call him, who I know. It ain't it. It ain't it. I know firsthand that ain't it. It's not it. Something, I don't know what, but this ain't the person I grew up with, the person who I used to come over all the time and handshakes to, Brandon, he'll sit down there with you, if you're watching the game or something, but Brandon, he'll talk to you and, hang out with you, go back up to his room, he's not, intrusive or nothing like that. He's just a real fun-loving guy. We come over, we play baseball, or we'll throw the ball outside from the football, basketball, just doing things that, boy cousins do. Me being older, and him and Sean both, they're very competitive. So we playing ping pong to anything. They trying to win, and I'm not trying to let them win. But that's the environment. Those are some of the events that we would have all the time. Like, it's just something that was just of the norm. So when you start seeing things out of the norm and people's attitudes changing, I'm feeling like they're experiencing something that I'm not with them every day or in every situation, but he's probably experiencing something that I have no idea about. But it doesn't change the fact that who he was to me and who he is to me and my love for him. So,
and how would it affect you if Brandon was given the death penalty?
That would tear me up. I don't think that he deserves that.
Objection. Relevance.
Sustained. The last answer is stricken. Witness is not going to give an answer about what they think the proper penalty is that's inappropriate. The jurors decide that. So the last answer is stricken.
Thank you. Nothing further.
Ross?
Good morning, sir.
Morning.
Sounds like you were pretty close to the Martin family.
Yes, sir.
You're very close to Michael Martin, Uncle Mike.
Oh, yeah.
You'd help him with his newspaper route, is that correct?
Yes, sir.
And he was kind of a father figure from what I gathered with your testimony. Would you agree?
Oh, yes, sir.
You were also close with Brandon as well, correct?
Yes, sir.
You'd see Brandon as often as you could, even though it wouldn't necessarily be every day. Is that right?
Yes, sir.
When was the last time you've seen Brandon?
I think the last time I seen Brandon, my my uncle was sick. My mother was going over to the house to help my uncle move around a bit, and Brandon was at the house. It was after Labor Day of 2015. Labor Day, we had a event at my...
So it's been about 5 years?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Yes, sir.
Brandon, as far as you could tell, you never saw him physically abused, right?
No, sir.
Never saw him verbally abused?
No, sir.
You never saw him get any spankings?
No, sir. I don't think so. No, I don't think so.
Would you define Brandon as an outgoing, spoiled brat?
At times.
If you had to define Brandon, though, just if you had to define him generally, would you describe him as an outgoing, spoiled brat?
Again, like I said, at times, because he could be, but if that's the definition overall for him, I wouldn't define him as that.
Okay. You were interviewed by an investigator, Fuller, from my office, correct?
Mm-hmm.
Is that yes?
Yes.
Yes, yes.
That was on October 1st, 2015?
I'm not sure exact dates, but it possibly could have been around that time, yes.
It was around the last time you saw Brandon, correct?
Yes.
All right. And Investigator Fuller asked you, if you had to define Brandon, how would you? Do you recall that question?
No, sir.
Okay. And do you recall your answer? If I had to define my cousin Brandon to me was an outgoing, spoiled brat.
I don't recall that.
Okay. There is, do you see a folder with your name on it?
Yes, sir.
Okay, if you can open up that folder, there's a transcript. Is there another folder with a transcript? Something that looks like...
How many pages is it? How many? Is it 3 pages?
No, it'd be like 60 pages or 75 pages or so.
No, sir.
Is there another folder with your name on it?
Yes, sir.
Oh, okay. Do you see the transcript in there?
Yes, sir.
Okay, if you could turn to, and you don't recall saying that, is that correct?
Yes, I don't recall saying that.
So if you could turn to page 21 and to yourself, look at lines 10 to 13. And when you're done reading, you can just look up at me.
Okay.
Okay. Does that refresh your memory?
Yeah, it's gonna have to. I mean, sure.
Okay. And so when you were asked how would you define Brandon Martin, your answer was, to me, Brandon Martin is an outgoing, spoiled brat, correct?
That's what it says here. Yes.
Okay. And would you also define him as kind of like a mama's boy?
Correct.
All right. Meaning that he was pretty much spoiled by his mom growing up, correct?
Sure.
You notice that once Brandon signed that professional baseball contract, his attitude towards his parents started changing, correct?
During that time, those were the events that it was after that you saw the changes, correct?
So once he signed the baseball contract, he began to be more disrespectful towards his parents.
Correct.
And you knew that during his first off-season pro baseball, he went to go play professional baseball, and then he had a first off-season, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yes?
Yes, I'm sorry.
All right.
Yes.
And then during the off-season, he didn't move back with Melody and Michael, correct?
No.
In fact, he rented a mansion in Yorba Linda.
Yes.
And you visited him in that mansion, did you not?
Once. Yeah.
Once. Will you describe that house?
Nice big home.
Do you know, would you estimate the square feet?
Maybe over 5,000 square feet.
And then during this time when you saw Brandon, you noticed that he'd start lying about certain events. Is that right?
As far as?
Well, okay. Did he have some sort of expensive car that he liked to drive?
He had his BMW.
BMW. And what happened to that BMW?
I believe it was wrecked.
Okay, and who wrecked it?
I'm not sure.
Okay. Well, did Brandon tell you that he wrecked it?
No, my uncle Michael told me that he had wrecked it.
Okay. Now, did Brandon tell you something differently about that BMW?
No, sir. I'm not sure having a conversation with Brandon about the BMW and the car.
Okay. When you were asked about what things Brandon would lie about, was that something that you brought up to Investigator Fuller?
I believe that he would have, if he did something like that, I don't think that he would have wanted to tell his father that. Okay. His father telling me that was what his father believed that he had done.
Okay. And what about how Brandon was spending money during this time? How would you describe that?
I would just see the cars. So as far as what he was doing with his money, I would think that he would be doing what any kid in his position would be doing with their money. What he was doing with it, I do not know. All I would see is the cars. Okay.
In the second off season, he didn't move back in with his parents. Is that correct?
No.
He moved to another house in Eagle Glen.
Yes, sir.
And you notice that there were some of Brandon's dysfunctional childhood friends that lived with him in Eagle Glen.
Sure.
And that caused you concern, right?
Yeah. After having conversation again with my Uncle Mike about those friends.
Okay.
Yes, sir.
So when Brandon is living at Eagle Glen, according to you and Uncle Mike, he's basically hanging out with friends that wouldn't really appreciate your son hanging out with. Would you agree?
So are you saying, so I'm getting it correctly, what you're saying is I wouldn't appreciate my son hanging out with the same friends that Brandon was hanging out at that time?
Right.
Yeah, so according to my Uncle Mike, yes, the behaviors of those friends, he had questions that were in question. No, I would not like my son to.
And the reason why is because one of those roommates or housemates of Brandon's was selling drugs?
Again, that's a conversation with my uncle that he thought or that was in question that one of them was.
Okay.
I've never seen that.
Okay.
So,
but that was your understanding, is that Brandon was hanging out with
correct.
the wrong crowd.
Correct.
And part of the wrong crowd was selling drugs.
Correct.
Brandon actually told you that he was feeling a lot of pressure from his friends because his friends were kind of mooching off him, right? He had pressure because he felt he had to continually give money to his friends and family. Correct?
Say that one more time, sir.
Okay, so Brandon had expressed to you that he felt continual pressure to provide other people with money.
Yes.
Is that right? And that caused him a great deal of distress.
Possibly.
I mean, that's what he expressed to you.
Yes. Yes.
And the time, you mentioned a time when Brandon used the N-word towards his dad. Is that right?
Yes, sir.
You recall that?
Yes, sir.
You also, Brandon had also demonstrated to you that he was actually embarrassed about his ethnicity. Is that correct?
That he said that to me?
He demonstrated to you in some fashion that he was embarrassed about his ethnicity.
No, if I perceive that from anything, that would be from him using that word to call his father that, in the context in which he did. But no, me and Brandon have never had a conversation where he told me specifically, I don't like being black.
Okay. Now, when you were interviewed by my investigator, he being Investigator Fuller, had asked you about this, and you told Investigator Fuller that you realized that Brandon was embarrassed with his ethnicity. Is that true?
I don't recall saying that.
Okay. Did Brandon ever ask you if God would still like him regardless if he was black or white?
I don't recall that.
Okay. That same transcript, if you could go to page 53, lines 33 to 35.
Where am I looking at, sir, now? Page 53?
Page 53, lines 33 to 35. And when that, if that refreshes your recollection, if you could look up that name.
I don't recall this, sir.
Okay.
Yeah, I don't recall that. I mean, we have many conversations, but, you know, from being just a Christian family, just...
Right, but you only had one conversation with Investigator Fuller, correct?
Yes, sir.
And you agree that, as per the transcript, that's what you said?
Again, this right here, I can't recall and say, yes, that's a conversation I even remember having with Detective Fuller.
Okay.
So, yeah.
Did you tell Investigator Fuller that your belief was that based on the wrong crowd that Brandon was hanging out with, this is pretty much what he absorbed, or the beliefs that he was adopting?
Yes, I did tell him I believe that the environment potentially had something to do with what he was going through.
How many times have you been to that Winthrop residence?
A number?
Yes, how many?
Hundreds of times.
Okay.
Yeah.
Now, when was the last time, last time you were there was in September of 2015?
Yes.
Okay. Now, were you called to do some sort of intervention with Brandon?
I was called by Sean, but I was at work on a Sunday or a Monday. I can't recall the day, but it was a Sunday or Monday, and he was saying that they were going to come to the house and they were going to have an intervention with Brandon.
But he didn't say intervention.
No, he did not.
He said that they were going to go beat his ass.
Right.
All right.
Yes, sir.
You've been there. You've been to the residence 100 times or so, to the Winthrop residence.
Yes, sir.
And do you go through when you arrive, you go through the front door, is that right?
Yes, sir.
Okay. And do you know if that's how everybody enters the house, family members too, or if you don't know, that's fine?
I would think so. Yeah.
Well, I mean, a lot of people. Okay, that's fine.
Yeah.
I'll leave it at that. Nothing further.
Mr. Welber? Thank you. Just briefly. Mr. Abdullah, when you were interviewed by the investigator, that was about 2 weeks after the murders. Is that about right?
Yes, sir.
Fair to say that you were pretty angry right after the murders about what happened.
Yes, sir.
And you were trying to be as truthful as possible with the investigator, yes?
Yes, sir.
Fair to say that your emotions were running high?
Sure. Yes, sir.
You've now had 5 years to think about this, and probably more than you wanted to. You think about this situation differently now than you did back on October 1 of 2015?
Completely.
In what way?
Then I was angry. I was very angry. And so when I took time now to step back and to look at it, and I mean, there's things I can't control, and things I try to look at from a different perspective. Now, I would guess you say more forgiving. Try to be more understanding about the situation as far as more understanding. I mean, there's no way to really understand this. To me, this is just heartbreaking. I mean, I lose my uncle, I lose my cousin, I lose my other uncle. Like, this is terrible. But I can't. I have to relinquish some of my heart. I can't just hold on to this and just. I have to. Forgiveness for me is like healing for myself. When I look at the situation, when I think about the situation. So then I was really angry, and I don't think I was looking at anything from a forgiving spot that day, or for a while.
When you were interviewed by that investigator, you told him that Brandon had become schizophrenic.
That's what it seemed like, talking to voices as far as my definition of what I have about schizophrenia. I don't know everything, but the speaking to voices and hearing voices and watching it play out and watching it happen.
Is that mental illness issue something that you've taken into consideration over the last 5 years and your forgiveness?
Yes, sir.
Nothing further.
Mr. Beecham?
Yes. When you were questioned back in 2015, October 1st of 2015, that was much of the same questions I just asked you, correct?
Yes, sir.
Such as, how would you define Brandon? And you said an outgoing, spoiled brat, right?
Yes. I'm not, again, I don't recall the conversation with Fuller specifically, right, but I could see myself, yes, saying that. That's why I said yes, sir.
Because it's the truth, right?
A lot of it is.
Well, you wouldn't lie to an investigator doing a homicide investigation, right?
No, sir.
Okay. And you did say that you thought, in your opinion, that Brandon may have become schizophrenic back then, right?
Yes.
Is that yes?
Yes, sir.
And so you had that mental illness, however that weighed in your mind, as an opinion back then in 2015, correct?
Yes, sir.
Right? And then, but you said that the reason why you believed that he was schizophrenic was because all the drugs that he was doing.
No.
You did not say that.
I can't say that I said that because of all the drugs he was doing, because I'm not sure he was. It was a potentially, well, that could lead to that, but I didn't say that's exactly what led to him doing that.
Okay, we'll come back. We'll circle back to that in a second. But you had the opinion that he was schizophrenic, right?
Yes.
But you're not a doctor.
Right.
You're not a psychiatrist.
Correct.
You're not a psychologist.
Correct.
You're not a clinical therapist, correct?
Correct.
All right. So it's whatever lay opinion you had was your lay opinion, correct?
Correct.
But the foundation of that lay opinion was the drug usage.
I've never seen Brandon use any drugs, so I would never tell anyone, well, it's because of this, because of that, because I'm not a doctor.
Okay, but
right.
Okay, but doctors also don't see their clients using drugs. You're basing this based on his reputation and the reports that you're getting from friends and family members, right?
Okay.
Okay, and so that's the basis of your opinion that he had schizophrenia, right?
Right.
But you also had an opinion that the schizophrenia was actually caused by the drug usage.
I don't see myself saying that. I only say what I would see. So if I didn't see it, I wouldn't say it's based off of him doing drugs, because I've never seen Brandon do drugs.
All right, but you saw him do marijuana, right? Yes or no? Have you seen him do marijuana?
Yes.
Okay. Why was it difficult for you to answer that question?
Action argumentative.
Overall, may answer.
It wasn't hard for me to answer the question. It's just this situation.
Because it sheds a negative light on Brandon, right?
No, it has nothing to do with shedding a negative on Brandon. It's just I have never seen Brandon using to the point where I would make a comment and say that what I did see him do as far as marijuana, it's not because of that would cause a schizophrenia. That's what I'm saying.
So you wouldn't never say that him doing drugs is the cause of him doing drugs is the cause of the schizophrenia.
Correct. I just gave an opinion of what I thought it could possibly be, which is schizophrenia. But I never leaked.
All right. Going back to, do you see a report in there that says Riverside County District Attorney in the folder? Not your transcript, but there's in the folder. Do you see that?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Yes, sir.
On the third page, the top line, you can actually start by the bottom line on page 2 and the top line on page 3.
Right.
Okay.
Right.
You told the investigator that you were convinced Brandon had become schizophrenia, possible because of drug usage.
Right.
Right? Now, I want to go back to these voices that you said Brandon was hearing. There was a kitchen incident where you heard Brandon use the N-word towards his father, right?
Correct.
Okay. Now, you testified that was kind of the basis of why you thought Brandon was hearing voices, right?
Objection, mistaken testimony.
No.
Okay.
Overall, you can answer. Answer will stand.
Okay, so the answer is no. So you heard Brandon tell his father the N-word.
Called him the N-word, yes.
Okay, called him the N-word.
Correct.
Okay. Did Brandon say, Dad, voices are telling me to call you the N-word?
No.
Okay.
No.
It was just something very offensive that you saw Brandon do.
Correct.
All right. Now, going back to there was another time when you saw him passing a family portrait, and he said to himself, family, and mumbled something to himself about family, right?
Mm-hmm.
Is that a yes?
Yes.
Okay. Now, Brandon say, voices are telling me to say family, and mumble to himself, right?
No, he did not.
So you don't know if Brandon just saw that and he was frustrated with his family and just said something to himself, right?
But during that time, he was speaking to something. I don't know who he was speaking to, and he was answering questions. So that's why it threw me off. I was confused because he was talking to himself.
Or he
in a matter of, I'm sorry, sir.
Or he was frustrated because of the family situation and he was talking to himself.
Possibly. I do not know. All I know is I see him talking to himself and talking to another entity that was there that I know nothing about, or that I don't know what he's doing. I just know he's not talking directly to me.
You don't know if he was talking to another entity or just talking to himself out of frustration.
Sure.
Right? I mean, you played sports growing up, haven't you?
Sure.
And what was your favorite sport?
Let's say basketball.
Basketball, okay. And were you a three-point shooter? Were you down low? Would you do layups? What?
Anything you needed me to do, I could pretty much. I liked it all.
Okay, let's say that you went for a clean drive to the basket and you missed a layup.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, and would you agree that's a pretty basic basketball maneuver?
Sure.
And if you missed a layup, you'd be frustrated, right?
Sure.
And you might talk to yourself. You might say, Jamal, man, you got to do better than that, right?
Sure, but that's not a conversation that you continue to have for minutes on end.
Okay.
And that's like, so you say something to yourself and you get over it, right?
Possibly. I mean, some people more than others, right?
Sure.
Okay. And you don't know how Brandon's drug usage was affecting him during that time, do you?
No, I sure don't.
And you don't know the great frustration that he might have felt towards his family, right?
Right.
Thank you. Nothing further.
Mr. Welborn?
No questions.
Witness excused?
Yes.
That's fine.
You're excused. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Next witness.
Thank you. Defense calls Matthew Budgell.
You do solemnly state that the evidence you shall give in the matter shall be the truth and whole truth. Open time?
I do.
Seated. Do you state and spell your first and your last name for the record?
Sure, it's Matthew Budgell, Matthew, Budgell.
Sir, we do need you to continue to talk into that microphone. You can adjust it if you like. The base moves the top, or adjust your chair, but you do need to use it, okay?
Understood.
As soon as the lawyers ask questions of you, we need a verbal or audible answer, but please wait until they're done asking the question before you respond, okay?
Yes, Your Honor.
All right, thank you. You may proceed.
Mr. Budgell, good morning, sir.
Good morning.
You traveled here from Hawaii, is that right?
Yes, sir.
And you came here to testify?
Yes, sir.
You know Brandon Martin.
I do know Brandon Martin.
How long have you known him?
I've known Brandon since 2010.
Do you see him in the courtroom today?
I do, yes, sir.
Can you tell us what he is wearing?
He's wearing a white collared shirt and a white mask.
Right behind me.
Yes, sir.
His head's down on the table.
Yes, sir.
Before today, when is the last time you saw Brandon?
I saw Brandon very early in 2015. I want to say it was before the springtime in 2015.
Tell the
February.
jury how you met Brandon.
I met Brandon through baseball. Brandon and I both were committed to go to Cal State Fullerton. We were both high caliber athletes in the state and in the area, and we met through playing on a scout ball team together for the Brewers Elite. And that's where we initially got connected. And
You've been about 17 or 18 years old at that point?
yes, I was 17.
And you were a high school senior?
I was going into my senior year, yes.
Brandon was the same age as you?
I believe age-wise we're a bit different, but the same graduating class, yes.
And you also were drafted by a Major League Baseball team, correct?
I was, yes, sir.
Showing you what's been marked as Defense Exhibit DDD for identification. You recognize that guy?
Yes, sir. That's a little young Matthew Budgell.
That's the young Matthew Budgell?
Yes.
How old are you in this photo?
19, 20?
You got drafted by the Mets.
Yes, sir.
So then you decided not to go to college, but to then go and pursue a professional baseball career.
Yes, sir.
How many years did you pursue that?
3 years.
And then why did you stop pursuing that major league career?
I was absolutely miserable playing baseball. I was very depressed towards the end of my career. I was just not happy anymore playing the game.
So you meet Brandon back in, I think you said 2010, and the two of you are playing on a team together, yes?
Yes, sir.
And I'm guessing these are the best players in and around Southern California.
Yes, we had a lot of talent in Southern California. We was a stacked team. We were playing in the highest competition tournament in the country for high school seniors.
What was your position?
I was a pitcher at that point. Brandon played shortstop.
And did you and Brandon become friends as a result of being on the same team?
Instantly, yeah. As soon as we met each other, we were both committed to go to Cal State Fullerton at that time. So we had a lot of relation there, and we did have a pretty good click instantly. Brandon's kind of reserved guy. So once you get warmed up to you, he becomes your family. But we instantly had a connection when we met each other in the summer going into my senior year.
I was going to ask you the question of, can you describe Brandon back when you first met him?
Sure, yeah. I'm very charismatic, confident, just a very genuine human being, somebody that you want to be around. And like I said, once he lets you in, you're family with him. That's the person that you want to associate with. That's the Brandon that I know, that I met in 2010.
What was the year, your first Major League Baseball season?
2011, yeah, when I was drafted, and I played a season in Florida, in Port St. Lucie.
Okay, so you were playing for the Mets with their minor league team in Florida,
Yes.
and Brandon was playing for a different team.
Yes.
The Rays?
Brandon played for the Rays. Yes.
Was he in the same area as you were?
General area, yes.
Okay, would you guys talk and connect while you were living in Florida?
We would converse, but we didn't really get to see each other very much during spring training. We played against each other in the season of 2012, which was after the year that we had lived together. We played against each other in 2012 when I was in Kingsport. Opening season, we played against the Princeton Rays, which is where Brandon was playing in Princeton. So we would see each other and connect when we would play either in Princeton or Princeton would come to Kingsport. We would see each other at the field, and then after the game, we would just make time to spend time with each other and hang out. And
Let me back you up a little bit. So 2011 is your first season, comes to an end, and you come back to Southern California.
yes,
And did you live with Brandon when you came back in that first off season?
originally I moved back with my parents, and then I did move in with Brandon at the house in Yorba Linda.
Okay, so that's the large mansion-style home in Yorba Linda?
Yes,
And when you signed with the Mets, did you also get a signing bonus?
yes, I did.
So was it a substantial amount of money?
Yes, for an 18-year-old kid to have, yes.
So in the off season, you're living with Brandon. Are there other people in the home?
There were other people in the home regularly.
How many people were living there?
Technically living there, it was 3 or 4 of us, but we did have friends that would stay over regularly.
Did you guys throw parties there?
We did.
Hey, tell us about those.
They were rather extravagant at times. We had a lot of people over. Some people were friends that I knew personally. Some people were friends that were, guests of the other people at the house that I would meet through, the interactions and the events that we would have at the house.
And up to that point, Brandon is still the same charismatic, genuine human being that you described?
Absolutely.
And at these parties, were there drugs present?
There would be drugs present at times.
Okay, were you taking drugs at that time?
I was.
What about, did you see Brandon do that?
I did.
What types of drugs did you see him taking?
We used marijuana and cocaine and alcohol.
How long did you live in that Yorba Linda home?
For about 4 months, give or take a couple of weeks.
Just the off season, basically?
Just the off season after New Year's 2012, I just had a realization, I guess, that I was probably making some questionable decisions, and I needed to get ready for the baseball season the next year, and so made the decision to leave the house with the boys, as much fun as we were having, and moved back to my parents' house in Irvine.
Okay, so that would have been January 2012?
Yes, sir.
Okay, so you move out, and do you know whether or not Brandon stayed there?
I believe they stayed in the house, in the Yorba Linda house, but I do not know exactly how long they stayed there and when they left.
Did you continue to be friends with Brandon?
Yes.
Did you continue to talk to him on a regular basis?
Yes.
Did you notice anything unusual about him or his behavior after you left the home?
The first time I ever noticed Brandon being a bit different temperamentally was when we were in Kingsport. Well, I was in Kingsport that season. Just noticing him not being quite as connected. It seemed, and he's not a very social butterfly necessarily, but again, like I said, we had a connection, and I did sense that the connection was fading a bit in the 2012 season. Became a little bit more personal with a couple of the teammates that he had on the Rays that I had met through Brandon. And after the 2012 season, I decided to not live with those guys in the second house. I lived with my parents again in Irvine. And after that year, Brandon, Justin, Hayes, and I drove back to California after that season.
This is the 2012 season?
The 2012
So
season.
the second season?
Correct.
Okay.
Yes.
So let me stop you right there. So you're back in Florida, and yourself, Brandon, you said a guy named Hayes,
Justin Hayes, yes.
and then the one other individual?
It was the three of us, myself, Brandon, and Justin, who drove back across the country after the season was over.
Okay, from Florida.
We were in Brandon was in West Virginia. Justin and I were in Tennessee. We drove up to pick Brandon up in West Virginia, and then we drove across the country back to Orange County.
And Mr. Hayes was also a baseball player?
He was not. He was a friend of ours. He was a roommate from the house and just lived with me in Tennessee.
How long did it take you guys to drive from across the country back home?
It was about 36 hours.
Okay, so you drove pretty fast.
We didn't stop. I think by the end of the season, we were burnt. I know myself personally had a bitter taste in my mouth at the end of the year, not being called up, and so I was ready to just be back home and be away from the baseball field.
Did you notice anything unusual about Brandon on that trip back?
He was not communicative with Justin and I very much on the way home, and he just seemed unwell. He didn't have much energy to communicate with us. He slept a lot of the car ride home. And when it was Brandon's turn to drive, he pulled over after just a couple hours because he said he needed to rest his eyes, which he had been resting his eyes most of the trip. And so Justin and I were a bit confused as to why he was so off. He just wasn't really present with us on the drive home. And so I took the liberties of continuing the drive the rest of the way home because Justin and I felt like that was probably the safest bet for us.
Did Brandon look different to you at that time?
Just tired. It was a long season.
Yeah. What's been marked as Defense Exhibit EEE for identification. You recognize this?
Yes, sir.
What is that a photo of?
It's a photo of me and Brandon.
Are you on the left?
Yes, sir.
That's Brandon. It looks like he doesn't have a shirt on.
Yeah. Sorry.
Why is that, looking at that picture, get you choked up?
Because it's not the person that's sitting behind you. And I feel like it's a very terrible shame that we're sitting here and discussing the character that I see in the photo here with me, but it's not the same person that we're sitting in the room with today.
What are you guys looking at here?
Beautiful nature. And just a large gorge somewhere in Utah.
This is on your way back from the end of that season.
Yes.
That road trip?
Yes.
You and Brandon are holding hands.
Yeah, we are.
Were you guys close?
We were.
You said that after that second season that you had kind of a bad taste in your mouth and might have been done with baseball. Yeah?
Absolutely, yeah. I retired the next spring.
Did you come back to Southern California after that season?
I did.
Did you stay with your parents?
I did.
And Brandon was, you know where he was at that time?
I believe they got after the 2012 season, they got a house in the Corona area, I believe.
Eagle Glen?
That sounds correct.
Okay. Did you ever go over to that home?
I visited twice.
Would you still see Brandon on a regular basis?
Not as much as I did when I was living with those guys. Yeah, there was a bit of distance this second year.
Did you notice any changes in his behavior when you guys got back to Southern California?
Are you referring to after the drive home?
Yes.
We didn't spend as much time together after that season, and so the time that when we would see each other would be a little bit more spaced out. And yes, I did start noticing changes in Brandon's personality and in the way that he would interact with me. If there was any level of interaction with Brandon, it just seemed like we were disconnected and that he was in a different place than where we were physically.
Do you remember an incident when you and your friend Hayes was pick Brandon up somewhere in Irvine?
I remember one day Brandon and Justin had come to grab me in Irvine, and we were going to Laguna Beach just to go hang out and enjoy the ocean for a bit. And on the way to Laguna, we were supposed to get on the freeway, and Brandon he's not from Irvine, he didn't know exactly where he was going. And
Brandon was driving?
Brandon was driving, correct, yes sir. And Justin Hayes was with us. He was in the passenger seat, and Justin told Brandon to follow the white car in front of us to get onto the highway. Brandon proceeded to go straight, even though the car had turned onto the highway. And upon asking him why he didn't follow the white car, he responded with, well, there's white cars everywhere. There's white cars to the left. There's white cars to the right. There's white cars all over the place. And that was the first time that I really saw something that was undeniably present, that there was something different, that there was something troubling Brandon in his head.
What about him talking about the cars made you feel there was something that was wrong or troubling with him?
Of course, there's white cars on the road all over the place, but anybody who's got a clear train of thought would be very easy, would be very able to process, follow that white car, and you follow the white car onto the freeway. And so the fact that there, in his mind, was such a clear difference between what the instructions were and what the reality was that he was seeing, there's a humongous gap between what was happening and what his reality was in his world.
What about his physical appearance? Did that look the same to you, or had he changed?
Over time, it changed. And again, after we stopped being around each other so consistently, it was the physical change was a bit easier to see, because after not seeing each other for a couple months, it seemed as though he wasn't maintaining his physical appearance the way that he was in this photo that we show here. He was chiseled. I mean, he's like a physical specimen. The guy is a freak athlete. And as time progressed, to see him slowly kind of deteriorating physically, it almost seemed as though a reflection of what was happening to him mentally as well, going through the same process.
You tell the jury, what does Brandon mean to you?
Brandon is my family. Brandon means a brother of mine. He's a sick human being who needs help, and he represents part of my own personal experience in this life that I don't understand exactly how we got to this point right now, but Brandon is a monumental representation of a pretty large issue that we have, in my opinion, in this country as a whole, that we seem to just sweep mental health under the rug and look for
Relevance.
Sustain.
I'm not sure what that means, sir.
Which means you just need to stop and the
Copy.
answer stricken as it relates to his opinion about mental health in the country. Next question.
How would it affect your life if Brandon was given the death penalty?
It would be a weight on my soul that I feel like doesn't need to be the way that it is. I feel like we have, after my own experience with cancer this year and getting a look at my own mortality, Brandon.
Just a minute. Stop.
Sure.
All right. The answer, it was non-responsive. Part about the cancer is stricken. Jury's admonished to disregard. Next question.
Again, I'll just come back to that same question, sir. Is how would it affect you personally, in your heart, if he was given the death penalty?
I would feel like we're defacing the value of human life and the importance of this. It would be I mean, to me, it feels disrespectful. I wouldn't have come all the way out here if it wasn't serious.
Sustain. Sustain. Answer stricken.
Thank you. Nothing further.
Ross.
Thank you, Rob. So you moved into the mansion in Yorba Linda in the off-season of 2011, yes?
Yeah, what about it, sir?
That's when you moved in, correct?
That is when I moved in.
And you moved in with, was Justin Hayes also there?
Yes, sir, he was already there.
Justin Hayes was a drug user?
Yes, Justin has used drugs.
Okay. And he was also selling drugs as well?
No, sir, he was not selling drugs.
Not to your knowledge?
Not to my knowledge.
Was he using heroin?
Not at the time when I lived in the house.
When you lived in the house, the Brea Police Department were called out there every weekend?
Every weekend sounds like an exaggeration, but the Brea PD was called a couple of times, yes.
A couple of times, so they weren't called out 19 times during the time you lived there?
I didn't keep a record of how many times the police were called, sir.
But you were doing cocaine at the time, yes?
I did.
Okay, so a lot of this time you were spent in the house, you was high as a kite,
Sometimes.
doing marijuana,
I smoked marijuana as well, yes, sir.
cocaine,
Yes, sir.
alcohol.
Yes, sir, as I stated earlier.
Did you experiment with any other drugs?
Occasionally.
Acid,
I did some acid in that house, yes.
ecstasy?
Not in that house, no.
Heroin?
No, sir, never.
And at this time, these parties you were having there, they're being attended by hundreds of people?
The New Year's party had a couple hundred people, but not the traditional, it wasn't a standard to have hundreds of people at the house.
But the New Year's party going into 2012, a couple of hundred people?
Yes, sir.
Okay. And drugs were prevalent throughout the house?
I would imagine that there was people who had drugs at the house, yes.
And one of those was Brandon Martin doing drugs, yes?
I did not physically watch Brandon do drugs on New Year's Eve.
Not on New Year's Eve, but you and he had done cocaine together, correct?
We had.
Yes. And you'd done marijuana together.
We had smoked marijuana together.
Did you also do acid together?
We did.
And ecstasy?
No, sir.
Okay. You did ecstasy without Brandon at some point then?
Yes, sir.
Apart from Justin Hayes, who else was in that house?
There was a guy named Dom. There was a gentleman that we called Raven. A guy named Cheyenne.
Were these baseball players?
They were not.
Okay. And who was picking up the tab for this house on Hidden Hills in Yorba Linda?
Brandon was on the lease, and I would pay Brandon just off the lease, off the record.
And do you know if these other people were paying rent who were staying there?
I do not know what the agreement was.
Now, in terms of Brandon's use of these illicit drugs during this period of November, December 2011, going into January 2012, you had mentioned that you left that house because you realized that things were getting out of hand.
Correct.
Okay. So you went back to your parents' home, correct?
Correct.
And when you say things were getting out of hand, would you say that your drug use was getting out of hand?
My personal decisions were becoming a problem in my own life, yes.
And did you see the drugs affecting Brandon Martin at that time as well?
I saw us all being a bit lost at that time.
Okay. Well, I mean, wasn't it true that with regards to Brandon Martin, he seemed to have a necessity for using cocaine?
Again, at that point in time, we were partying a lot, and we created some bad habits for ourselves.
Yeah. But Brandon Martin needed the drugs.
I don't know if he needed the drugs.
You don't, but from what you've said before, that it was kind of, he didn't get the memo that you need to stop using these drugs in the same way as you got the memo when you went back to your mom's house.
Is that a question?
Yes.
Okay.
So he did not get the memo.
I don't know if Brandon got the memo. I didn't ask Brandon.
Right. But you left the house and went back to your parents.
Yes, sir.
And when you left the house, you left these other people behind, including Brandon Martin, who were doing cocaine, marijuana, acid, ecstasy, correct?
Again, I'm not sure about ecstasy usage. I personally don't know about that part of what you're referring to, but yes, I did leave the rest of the people who were living at that house.
Okay. And when you left the house, they remained there until Brandon went back to Florida in 2012 for spring training.
I presume that is correct. I don't know exactly what everybody else's living arrangements were.
Well, just in terms of Brandon Martin, he went back to Florida in 2012 because that's when you were in contact with him during that time, correct?
We had spring training in March of 2012.
Okay. So he had left Yorba Linda and gone to Florida.
That would make sense.
Yeah. Now, and you had some contact with during that time. In the off season of 2012, he comes back and rents a house in Eagle Glen.
Correct.
But you do not move into that house.
Correct.
Does Justin Hayes move into that house?
I believe so.
Okay. In fact, was the whole gang back together from Yorba Linda except for you?
I don't know that it was the whole gang, quote unquote, but I do believe it was a majority of the individuals.
Okay. And you said that you became more distant from Brandon Martin during that time.
Correct, sir. From just everybody and partying as a whole at that point in time.
At that point in time, you were not doing illegal drugs anymore?
That's not true.
You were still using drugs?
Occasionally.
Okay. But not like when you were in Yorba Linda?
True.
And so when you went to the house and visited the people at Eagle Glen, did you use drugs when you went?
No, sir.
Did you see any drug use when you were there?
Marijuana, but that was it. And
Marijuana still a
alcohol.
drug? Marijuana still a drug?
I'm sorry?
Is marijuana still a drug?
In my opinion, no, I don't believe so. I think it's a plant.
And so when you went back to Eagle Glen, you did not take drugs yourself, and you may have seen some marijuana use.
Correct.
And you visited twice during that period, and then at that time you had noticed some changes in Brandon Martin.
Personality-wise, just not quite as soft, as connected to me, and again, kind of a bit of the same explanation, saying that feeling a bit of the connection fading, as though we weren't quite as brotherly almost, I guess you could say, just feeling a bit of space and distance. And
during that period of time, were you personally aware of what drugs Brandon Martin was using?
No, sir.
Okay. So going from there, would you say that he was looking tired, or he was looking, how would you say he was looking?
Going from where?
From the Eagle Glen when you were going to Laguna Beach.
Are you referring to the car ride?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Gotcha.
Yeah.
Distracted, I would say, is probably the best term.
And you obviously have seen many people under the influence of drugs.
I have.
Okay. Now, going back to a period in, you said the last time you saw him being Brandon Martin, was around about April 2015?
Yeah, March, April, earlier that year, yes, sir.
And you haven't seen him since?
Today is the first time that I've seen him since that day, yes, sir.
And when you last saw him in April 2015, would you say that he looked like a druggie?
I would say he looked sick.
Have you ever said to anybody that he looked like a druggie in April 2015?
I do not recall.
Okay. Do you recall talking to the LA Times regarding Brandon Martin?
I do.
Okay. Do you remember telling the Los Angeles Times he looked like a druggie, he lost himself?
I don't recall saying that quote.
Okay.
I remember talking a lot about our drug use, and I also remember talking about mental health being a major issue in that conversation with the LA Times.
Yes. So you remember everything except for the fact that he looked like a druggie?
Correct. Yes, he looked.
Would you like me to show you the article to refresh your memory?
If you feel like that would be helpful.
Well, would you feel like it would be helpful to see your words quoted in the LA Times?
If you think that would be helpful, sir, sure.
We'll just put it on the Elmo.
I'll put it on the Elmo. And you've read this article, correct?
I have, yes, sir.
Okay. And this is an article by Nathan Fenno called "A Prospect Becomes a Suspect."
I don't know the name of the title.
Okay. Well,
You have the spelling of the last name of the...
Fenno is Fenno. I'm going to show you this article, and you'll be able to see it on the screen in front of you. I just want to take a moment. You see that there?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Then on the bottom of this page, where it begins in April 2015, Budgell, you see what's highlighted there? You read that to yourself, please.
I see it.
You see that? Does that refresh your memory that you told the LA Times writer that he looked like a druggie?
No, sir. Honestly, it doesn't refresh that I would say that quotation straight to the reporter.
Okay.
And I do recall reaching out to the writer of the article afterwards.
Let me stop you there. So from your point of view, at that time, in 2015, were you aware that he'd been released by the Rays?
I learned about it when I heard about the incident that happened.
Okay. When you saw him in 2015, around about spring training time, did he tell you that he'd been released by the Rays?
No, sir.
Okay. So you are these close people together, you and Brandon, yeah?
Well, as I told you, over the course of time, once I left that house, we did start periodically creating distance and stop being so connected and close.
And so in that period of time, your disconnection was such that he did not tell you he had been released by the Rays because of failed marijuana tests.
He did not tell me, correct.
Thank you. Nothing further.
Mr. Wilmer?
Just briefly, Mr. Budgell, you said that after that article was written, you contacted the writer.
Yes,
Why did you do that?
because I felt like our conversation had been completely skewed.
And was that after you read the article?
Yes, I was rather upset, actually, with the way that the article came out.
When you say skewed, what do you mean?
The emphasis in the article clearly points at drug use, and in our conversation, the emphasis was more on Brandon's situation and his health.
What did you tell the writer?
I told the writer that we had a serious mental health problem and that Brandon was sick. We used drugs, and I told the writer that we used drugs a lot. But I told the writer that there's a much bigger issue.
And it's fair to say that you called the writer because you felt like that was not fairly represented in the article?
Absolutely.
Nothing further. Thank you.
Mr. Kurz?
No, Your Honor.
Witness excused?
Yes.
You're excused. Thank you, sir. Ladies and gentlemen, we'll take a brief morning recess at this time. Remind all of you not to discuss facts of this case amongst yourselves or with anyone unrelated to the trial.